Hello and welcome back to the Misfit Business Lounge podcast. I'm your host, Rosie Victoria, and today's episode is sponsored by the beautiful Christina Maria. Now, Christina is an incredible online brand strategist that specializes in putting the personable back into your brand. And so if you're an online business who's been feeling disconnected from your audience, you feel like you've lost that personable connection, then Christina is the hire for you because she's going to support you with getting your personality recognized and making huge waves on social media. Now, Christina is going to increase your profit, increase your brand recognition, and really allow you to feel soul-led inside of your business. I will drop all of her details down below, but stay tuned for today's episode that is everything motherhood and business. Okay, motherhood and business. There's a reason why I've chosen to do this episode today. And I've always tried to separate motherhood and business as much as you can, right? Because when I'm in business, I'm this fierce leader. I'm, in my element. I'm in my geniusness. And when I'm with my children that are 4 and 2, I'm mama bear. And so it's always been very intentional for me to have these clear boundaries that my children recognize when mama's at work, mama's at work. And so you're not going to see me, jumping on a paid container with my babies in the background. You're not going to see me leading with my children very often because I believe that I'm more than just the identity of being a mom. However, the reason why I wanted to do this episode today is last night I actually felt a little bit overwhelmed with motherhood. It's the summer holidays here, and given we've never had a nanny, our children go to nursery 3 days a week, and that's just because I want them to have that interaction. If I could, I would absolutely keep my babies at home all day, every day. But neither of them started nursery until they were 2. Luna is now going to school in September, and I've always been a hands-on mom. I've always been the mom that's wanted to do all the baby groups. I breastfed exclusively for 4 years on the trot, 2 years with Luna, and by the time Luna was weaning, Freddie was then born, who was then onto the breast, and so it ended up being a 4-year journey. And I've been incredibly hands-on mom, and I think that always shocks people, especially because Lewis is predominantly classified as the stay-at-home dad, and whilst he has his own things going on with renovating cars and the hobbies that he has, he's classified as the stay-at-home dad, and so people just presume that I must be working. However, I have had the privilege of being, hands-on with my children, going to all the baby groups, spending time with them, nurturing them, being there when they walk, being there at bedtime, doing all the things that I wanted to do. But that doesn't mean that it hasn't been hard. There has definitely been hardship in the journey of motherhood and business. And it's not been a case of, motherhood and business intertwining and feeling like conflicting forces. It's been more about, motherhood is a journey, and we have good days, we have bad days, we have days where we just feel mentally exhausted. And it's more about me remembering myself and my genius and coming back into my leadership and remembering that I have 2 very separate identities here, and I need to remember both of those identities, because when I go into my motherhood, I'm very like, let me help you eat your dinner, right? There's that spoon feed energy. Whereas when I'm coming into my business, I don't desire to spoon feed my clients. I don't desire to have that, let me teach you how to walk. And so I need to remember the more fiercer components of my identity. And so there definitely is that shift in what I'm giving in each of those spaces. And that can create a little bit of divide because I constantly have to remember the multiple parts of my personality. But the reason why yesterday felt hard in business is I always felt like when I had children, I'd have a village. I grew up with a lot of help from my mom's grandparents and my dad's grandparents. And so I had these what I thought were very, very strong family values. And looking back, there was a lot of dysfunction, right? And I think a lot of people recognize that when they step into adulthood. But I always thought that when I had my children, there'd be a village around me. There'd be people we could lean on. There would be people that could support us. And that hasn't been the case, and it's not been the case since day one. We're very, very lucky that we have grandparents that'll, treat our kids and take them to, certain places on one-offs. But day to day, we don't necessarily have a village. And so it's been the school holidays. The kids have been home 24/7. There's been things that have needed to get done in the business because life has to keep functioning. And there's been this demand of them needing to be present with the children and also wanting to make this big summer of memories. And I just found myself have this overwhelm of like, where the fuck is the village? Where is the village? Because I was looking around me and, you know, I have siblings, we have grandparents on either side, and there is no village. There's no one to say, let me have the kids today so that you can do this in your business. There's no one to say, you know, you guys go and have a date night and we'll look after the children. We don't have a nanny. I would never leave my children with a nanny just through personal preference. You know, I don't believe in hiring babysitters. I can't believe that that's even a thing in 2024, that people just hire random babysitters online, but that's another conversation. And so, like, it's just us. And again, we're very lucky that Lewis is not at a 9-to-5 job and can support and can help with the childcare, but it's hard, right? And sometimes you're like, oh, it feels like a juggling act. And it's just the way that it felt yesterday. It just felt like a juggling act. It just felt like, I want to lead with business today, but also I've got my babies that are looking at me. And I know that they're craving that little mama bear energy. It's the summer holidays. Why wouldn't they be craving that? And so I just had to choose motherhood. And I just had to choose to sink into enjoying time with them. And sometimes that's hard because that fierce part of my leadership's like, but I want to do all of the things. There's all of these energies that I want to be available to, but I have to choose motherhood. And I'm very strong in the values that motherhood will always come first in my life. You know, I'm going to be at every class assembly. I'm going to be at every school pickup. And from September, my hours are going to 9 to 3. And people have to book their calls within those times, because the rest of the time, like, I'm going to be with my babies. And so if you don't book your calls 9 till 3, and I'm not saying I'll work 9 till 3 every day because that gives me the fear of God. But what I am saying is, if you don't book your calls between those times, you're not going to be able to book a session with me, because I'll be picking my babies up from school. And then Freddie will still be obviously only going 3 days a week to nursery. And so, like, the babies will always come first. If they're sick, I'll choose them. If they need me, I'll choose them. The babies will always come first. It's just the type of parent that I desire to be. But I was also craving bringing this like fierceness in my leadership. And so there was a bit of like, oh, like, okay, I'm going to choose this and I know it's the right thing to do. But then also the reminder that you don't need masses of time. You know, the thing that always shocks me is when people have children, they think that running a business takes masses of time, and actually it takes intention and boundaries. And so when I look at yesterday and sinking into motherhood and having my little like temper tantrum on like not having a village and feeling like it was all on us, and then I really got over it, and I had 90 minutes in my office before I went and spent the day with the children. And in those 90 minutes, I was able to record a YouTube, catch up with my email, schedule my email marketing, message back a couple of clients on Voxer, and it felt yummy. Like, it felt activated. It felt soul fueling. And then I went and spent the day with the kids. I came back, I checked in with my Voxers, I recorded a video for my sales accelerator, and then that was it. Like, I was done for the day. And it was a no client call day, which was obviously a benefit. But the truth is, look at how intentional you can be. Now, within that time, whilst I was out having time with the kids, then my team was setting up a funnel for a freebie that then went to an upgrade of like an 11/11 offer, which then brought in 50 more people into a low-end offer, which is great, right? It's a little juicy like day cash injection. And so when I look at that, there was still a system in place. There was still magic happening through my lead, through my direction. So I think when you have children, the thing that you need to remember is that you have to be intentional. You don't have the same time as somebody without children. And this is why I'm always very wise of who I look to in the online space, because I want the people that are being an advocate for being intentional with time and not spending every single day at your desk. You know, that just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't feel right to me. So with the intention, you need to know what you want to do, what's going to be the most beneficial, and how you're going to do it to the highest degree of energy, because you have no time to waste with children. There is no point launching this flimsy launch and not going all in. You have to go all in. And so you need to make sure that there's this elevation in your communication, and you need to make sure that when you're launching the thing, it comes across with the energy and the capacity that you desire. And so I think sometimes it's just about slowing down and making sure that when you're leaning in your business, it's not just a side thing, right? There's intention, there's capacity, there's seeing it at the highest volume of energy. Yes, my children come first, but my children also know when mum's in her office, that's the boundary. We're not to go in there. We're not to be in the background of a Voxer chat. We're not to do that, because it's not fair on my clients and it's not fair on my business. My business is our livelihood, right? And so they have to respect that boundary. I think it's equally as important that the children understand, Like, mama's got to work right now. Mama's got to do the things right now. And so there is boundaries in place. And so when I am doing something in my business, I'm always thinking, let's not just rush through this. Let's not just do this as fast as possible. Let's make sure that it has the intention, that when it lands, it comes across with the capacity that was intended. Now, for me, I fell pregnant in 2020, not 2020, I fell pregnant in 2019 and I gave birth to Luna in 2020. And I fell pregnant very unexpectedly. I'd actually been having womb treatment prior to meeting Lewis, and I was having some injections in my womb lining because I was having some crumbling and different things going on. And so I was having these injections. I met Lewis. He was super cute. He used to take me to my injections. And I never quite knew whether I'd be able to have children, right? I was having a lot of hormone treatment because I was struggling with my hormones. I had endometriosis, so I'd had several operations. And I never knew whether children was going to be a part of my journey. And so I wasn't necessarily careful or cautious. And I was having hormone treatment at the time, which was meant to restore my body and give it the hormones that it needed. And so there was always that potential that that would work and that I might fall pregnant and that I should probably be on contraception. But me being me, I've just never agreed with contraception. I've just never agreed with hormones being inside of your body. And so I wasn't necessarily cautious. And from the day I met Lewis, you know, we'd moved in together after 3 weeks and we just said, do you know what, like, you're my life partner. Actually, the first night I spent with Lewis, he said to me, I'm going to marry you one day. Like, I just know it. And more on a spiritual level than a creep level, right? It was like very spiritual and we just knew it and we just felt it. And so in 2019, we'd just given up our house. We'd lived there for a year and we decided we were going to go traveling. We were going to live our life. We were going to splash out on the business. We were just going to have fun and enjoy our time together. And 3 weeks after we'd given up our house, we found out that we were pregnant. And I was incredibly sick during my pregnancy. I had hyperemesis, so I was in the hospital every 2 to 3 days on a drip. I spent weeks at a time in the hospital because they thought I had blood clots. I was throwing up. I had no nutrition. At 31 weeks, Luna was given a lung development injection because we were struggling. So it was a very chaotic pregnancy. And also within that time, I was the business owner. Lewis had no job because we'd gone all in on the business. And so there was a lot riding on my shoulders. And up until that time, I'd made 6 figures in my business, but I'd made it from a lot of showing up, going live several times a week, doing all of the things, being available. And now I was faced with this pregnancy where I didn't have the energy nor the capacity to give to my business in that way. And that was scary because it had all that we'd ever done in business to create the money that we had. Now, I knew at that point something had to shift. Something had to shift and something had to pivot. I no longer had the time or the availability or the energy to supply to run my business in that way. I couldn't be doing all of the things for a pittance anymore. I couldn't be, selling out my soul to make money. I couldn't be, launching my offers at ridiculous low end. And so I had to revisit and I had to relook. And during my pregnancy, I started to think about raising my price points, my standards, what I was available for, what I wasn't available for. I started to change the way that I showed up and be more intentional with my time. And things started to shift. And I will remember that my first 30K week was weeks after I'd given birth to Luna. And it was wild because I'd just given birth to this beautiful baby and I was breastfeeding and I was in my little baby bundle. We'd just gone into COVID, spanner in the works, and I had a 30K week. And I was like, what the fuck? I've barely done anything this week and I've just had a 30K week. But it was the way that I'd taken the time to be intentional with my business. I'd streamlined my funnel process. I'd created this beautiful bundle offer that had everything in place and it had the elevated communication, and I'd really thought about making money without having to do much at all. And that was incredible. It just kept bringing things in and kept bringing things into my surrounding. But there's a reason why, right? There was an intention, there was a standard, there was a magic that was in place. Now, looking at that period when I gave birth to Luna and we were in lockdown and obviously breastfeeding, I would jump on client calls breastfeeding. And now there's a no boundary of my kids even entering my office space because they're older and it's not as easy as just breastfeeding a child under your desk, right? But in the beginning, I did that because it fitted in with the lifestyle of my clients. It fitted in with the lifestyle of me and it felt good. It felt good for my family unit. And so I don't regret any of that. I don't regret, being that mom who was working and breastfeeding and living with my child in this exclusive little bubble whilst also growing and scaling a business. I love what I've created. I'm proud of what I've created alongside 2 children. But over the years, I had to get more intentional with, where am I going to prioritize my business? When am I in mama mode? Where do I just sometimes need to leave my business and be present as a mom? What is the boundary there? What is the standard there? And so I have learned a lot over my process, but I think the biggest thing has been learning that I have multiple identities. And within that, I think in the motherhood journey, right, you have multiple identities, because I'm the first one to share, like, I believe in gentle parenting, but I also believe in boundaries. And I had to learn that the hard way, because my dad wasn't on the scene as a child. And so we didn't have very many boundaries looking back. I think my mom was so tired as a single mom that we didn't have very many boundaries. She just like, yeah, go with the flow, whatever. But that actually resulted in me, you know, getting myself in some sticky situations as a teenager and, you know, not like having any boundaries in life, which is not healthy. And so I wanted to be that gentle parent whilst also having boundaries. And so I had to look at how to integrate that into my life and into my business. But motherhood, you have multiple personalities, because you have that playful version of you that's like, let's play games, let's have fun, let's dance around the room, like be crazy. And then you have that, like, let me teach you. And then you have the, here's the boundary. And then you have the, like, let me nurture you. There's so many different identities. And looking at business, there's also so many different identities. And so I've had to learn like when to click into different identities to really get the best from my life, because sometimes I need to be the nurturer for my children, for my clients, but I always need to be the leader. And so I need to lead by example, and I need to be the role model. And like my business identity is definitely different to my personal identity, because it brings like more of a fiery state. And also my children can see that, right? They can see my fiery state, and I want them to look at mama's energy in business and say like, wow, you are a woman, you are a force to be reckoned with. And so it's always been key for me to understand what are those different components of me, and when do I need to invite them at the right time. And so I know that this has gone on a little bit of a tangent and not really had a structure for like where it's going. But the message that I really wanted to get across today is, one, like, business is different when you have children, and so you're going to have to pivot and get those steps in place to be intentional. You're going to have boundaries. You have multiple parts of your personality, and you need to know when to trust those personalities. But 3, like, if I can do it without a village, and I can do it like without having, you know, a nanny, and whilst breastfeeding, and whilst having the majority of my days with my children trying to scrape Play-Doh off the floor and attending a million different baby groups and all of the things, then you can do it as well. Like, if I can do it, you can do it. Like, it gets to be that simple. And so children are never ever an excuse for me. It's just not a fucking excuse, because running a successful business is not about time. It's not about how much time you have. It's about how you lead. It's about the impact you make. It's about the intention. And so we can have the shortest amount of time and yet still make huge rapid shifts in our business. It's all about how you spend that time and the intention of where you place that time. So if you've enjoyed this video, drop me a like and subscribe down below. I feel like there's going to be a part 2 to this, because there's so much that I have to say about motherhood that it's like just this big ball of energy. And let me know in the comment section if this has resonated with you, if it's brought anything to the surface for you, and what you'd want in a part 2, because I feel like it requires a part 2. Like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, Jesus, we've had 18 minutes right now, and there's still so much more that I want to say.